Hello, loyal viewers and outstanding subscribers. It is again your friend, Wild Elf 26. Hey, this is a 2025 April 18 walk and rant. And this walk and rant is going to be probably about the Mortal Kombat franchise. So sit back or grab your walking shoes or whatever, and we'll see how it goes. See if I can remain on a central topic of Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat franchise in general, the good things, the origins, that kind of thing, and the not so great things about the continuations of Mortal Kombat through the years. And I forgive me ahead of time for the ums. I do have my ideas kind of researched, kind of pre-brought into a relatively synchronous way. It doesn't always come out sounding as sophisticated as I originally orchestrated it, so I do very much apologize for that. But it's an interesting night, and I don't want to get too far into the crux of it, but so yeah, there's a lot of YouTubers now with the Advent, the home version. Some would say the mini version of Mortal Kombat Arcade, thanks to a company known as Arcade 1-Up. Arcade 1-Up has made these different versions of Mortal Kombat that usually include the original 3 arcade Mortal Kombats, Mortal Kombat 1, Mortal Kombat 2, and Mortal Kombat Ultimate 3. Yeah, they kind of skipped over Vanilla 3 and went directly to Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Now it's up to you, the fans, to decide whether or not the 3 was more valid than the Ultimate. I still find it fascinating that the Arcade 1-Up people, the Arcade 1-Up brand, has not officially decided to include Mortal Kombat Trilogy as a playable game on one of the Arcade 1-Ups. And I know some of the Mortal Kombat purists, meaning the OG Mortal Kombat fans, arcade machines specifically, they will say there was never a Mortal Kombat Trilogy in the arcade. The closest thing we got was Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. And I know that. I'm aware of that. But since Mortal Kombat Trilogy had been adapted to so many interesting platforms, even a monochrome Game Boy tribute system, more or less, called the Tiger Game Com. By the way, I used to have one of those, and it was a horrible version of Mortal Kombat Trilogy. But I did like the Resident Evil 2 that was made for the Gamecom. Okay, I digress. I'm getting back. Yeah, Mortal Kombat Origin, or True Canon. And, I know this is a hairy subject to some of the people that came into the Mortal Kombat franchise later. Later in the runs, later in the consoles. And I will elaborate on the reasons why I don't feel certain MK games are lived up to canon. If I hear another person, call Sub-Zero Bihan or something, I'm going to chuck something at them because it's stupid. We're not supposed to know Sub-Zero's actual name. We're not supposed to know Scorpion's actual name. In the original canon, which was mostly due to the home console versions of the arcade mega smash hits, up there in Chicago, when Midway was alive and well and making arcade machines and pinball machines, there was this dream team of Ed Boon and John Tobias, and John Tobias did most of the legible artwork and story work. That's right, he wrote the majority of the stories, including the backstories for each fighter. And in a lot of these behind-the-scenes making of Mortal Kombat 3, these facts are very much apparent in those videos. But there's been so many interviews over the years. Basically, John was the lead art into the project and story. And then all the other artists there were kind of like lieutenants underneath John Tobias. But the head guy there on the project was Ed Boon. Ed Boon was the guy that would program, would actually make the functions of the game, the collision boxes, the mechanics of the game. And he would incorporate the art that John Tobias and his team would bring to Mortal Kombat. And then Ed would program all that into the game. The unique thing of the original OG Mortal Kombats is it used not motion capture, and this term kind of gets mistaken. It gets kind of screwed around. People don't seem to understand what motion capture is versus digitization. This is digitization capture is when you put somebody in front of a blue or green screen, and the person is usually in full costume for whatever character they're playing. And in the case of a fighting game, of course, it's usually a martial artist in full costume, and they're told to do a series of martial art maneuvers facing a certain direction, so light is hitting them from a specific direction. So when they do movement, shadows are falling where they're supposed to fall in a natural sort of way. And all those images, all that imaging gets digitized into little freeze frame shots. Then that gets reprogrammed, so when you hit a button, it activates a certain sequence of animations, pre-recorded video shots of these actors to do a roundhouse kick, a leg sweep kick, a roundhouse wheel kick, an uppercut high punch, that sort of thing. Or the movements that they do, which then digitally fireball or an ice ball or some other kind of weapon is added as a special move. Now, the surge of Mortal Kombat was, again, the good storytelling from John Tobias and the epic programming of Ed Boon at the time. Now, they were coming off of the popularity of fighting games like Street Fighter II, and there was a more primitive looking digitized fighting game called Pit Fighter. But Mortal Kombat really fine-toned the image and look of digitized fighting. And where Pit Fighter tried to do too many things at once, Mortal Kombat stuck with what actually works. 1 versus 1 on screen. Keeping to like a Street Fighter style formula. And at some point, it comes into play also that Mortal Kombat, of course, had blood. And this sparked some controversies later with the home versions, but the original arcade versions, arcade owners would buy these things, and they were in the $1,800 to almost $3,000 a pop for certain arcade machines back when they were brand new. And these machines usually had anywhere from a 22-inch to a 27-inch screen in their cabinets. And the cabinets themselves were heavy duty, and they were actually weighted down too, because if these people are going to spend this kind of cash for a public available coin operated machine, they don't want people to just easily be able to get in there one day and just walk off with the machine. No. So these machines would weigh around 400, 500 pounds. That's right. Their total pound weight after construction was 400 or 500 pounds. And in the case of Mortal Kombat 2, some of those machines would actually weigh more, because with the onset popularity of that sequel, there were PC boards that were getting stolen out of the machines. And when the arcade owners had to replace them, they were giving their grievances, their gripes to Midway about how this occurred. So Midway had offered some armor plating that they could actually lock down their machines with. But this would add additional weight to the machine. And of course, if you're trying to protect a coin-operated machine, making it even heavier is a good step in the correct direction. But so we're getting back to the first Mortal Kombat, and it featured 7 fighters, and one of the actors, Daniel Pesina, he played Johnny Cage, which was sort of a Midway in-house version of Jean-Claude. He was dressed kind of like Jean-Claude Van Damme from Bloodsport. And but he was a movie star actor, and he had kind of a sarcastic one-liners, and he was there to win the tournament and then win a contract for a really good movie afterwards, or at least have an idea or two for a good movie afterwards. But he also played the part of the 2 color swap ninjas. And in fighting games at that time, ninjas were kind of a mandatory thing to add to your fighting game. And so they added Scorpion and Sub-Zero. And John came up with some really good story backgrounds for these guys. The story backgrounds of the original arcade machines, which are the OG Canon. And the thing is, when you're messing with OG Canon, you have to understand that is the origin. That is the original Canon creations of those characters. And I'm not ready to flash forward ahead yet, but I'll get back to that in a minute. But the canon for the first 3 arcade machines is ultimately important. But Mortal Kombat featured a 5-button layout as opposed to the popularity of the 6-button layout that was the average at the time. And there were some fighting games that were trying to buck the average a little bit. Neo Geo had a 4-button layout, So their Samurai Showdown had a 4-button layout. The funny thing is that the home console ports of that game were button laid out for 6 buttons. So it's odd that the home console actually had more button availability and function for those buttons than the originating arcade machine. But like I said, that's how it was in the original one. But Samurai Showdown was kind of like anime fighting game, but with the blood and fatalities that you're more used to seeing from a Mortal Kombat style game. And it also proved, because the Samurai Spirits video game in Japan, arcades, had the same level of blood as its American Showdown counterpart. And so their gripes or their howlings about that their culture didn't allow depictions of gore or blood or any of that was complete malarkey, because the Samurai Spirits was just as bloody, and its sequels. But Mortal Kombat set the bar high because it looked very realistic. You had people in costume that were actually in the game, and their lifelike images, movement, and the shadows that they cast on the ground behind the character was absolutely perfect. Whereas you compare that to an anime style fighting game like Street Fighter II Turbo or Championship Edition, and they have kind of globs of shadow under them that aren't specific outlines to the character. Like in this video, you see this shadow of myself. I'm carrying the phone in one hand, carrying my groceries in the other hand. And you kind of wonder, you could see the definite shape and outline, and the different lights and the way they stretch in one direction or the other, making me look 12 feet tall. I, of course, am not 12 feet tall. What a shame. What a great basketball career I could have had. But, yeah, so an ultra-realistic shadow behind a fighter kind of makes a difference. And in Street Fighter, all they got was these globs that would extend. When the character would lean forward to throw a fireball, suddenly their shadow glob would grow by almost double the length. But it was just a generic shadow glob for every fighter, no matter who they were. And the characters themselves were obviously anime inspired, the way the art was put together. And because of the anime styled drawings, they come across as like an anime cartoon. And of course it doesn't look real, I mean, sure, you can get into watching a intense anime, but at the end of the day, it doesn't even remotely look real, not even a mistake of real. And Mortal Kombat, on the other hand, looked very real, looked shockingly real. The home versions often had no gamers under 17 can buy this or can play this or whatever. And before the rating system, there was the MA-17 that was slapped on them. And the rating systems are just a way for media to be categorized and a censorship step of some sort to be implied on them. I myself don't like censorship of any sort, but I do believe there needs to be like a categorizing to tell people whether or not the game is safe for younger players, or if it has shocking blood, shocking depictions of gore, those descriptions, that's okay, because at least it's honest and accurate about what the game or happening is. Myself, though, I was not a huge fan of any kind of censoring, and to this day I don't even like censoring on movies, and the whole debacle that happened with music censoring back in the 80s, that was a big waste of everybody's time. And that's where you get that very well-known explicit lyrics, parental advisory sticker and all that. But that often affected how certain records were going to be sold. Certain companies didn't want to sell music if it had the parental advisory sticker or something on it. And that's not good, because then that affects the fairness of music having a fair venue to be sold at, based on its merits rather than, what's considered safe and what's not. But yeah, Mortal Kombat looked real. Street Fighter looked like a cartoon. And it's not to say that Street Fighter games are not good. No, Street Fighter games are great. They definitely inspired Mortal Kombat to occur. But boy, when the first Mortal Kombat games got rolled into major arcades, the crowds around Street Fighter game basically dried up, and there was like a line outside the arcade and around the block practically. There are people that literally have driven a couple hundred miles, like almost 500 miles, just to go play the Mortal Kombats when they came out. And this was, practical gaming. This wasn't download stuff. You wanted to play the newest game come out, you have to go find an arcade and play it. And you have to hope that arcade had a decent budget, and that it was run by some decent people that weren't morons and could see the beauty of this wonderful game and put it in their arcade. A little while back recently, I was very disappointed. Here in Florida, I went to a beach arcade, and the only fighting game that I could find in there was Marvel versus Capcom. There was no Mortal Kombats anywhere. No, not a single one. And I just thought, wow, and it's BS if they're trying to say, oh, well, families go on vacation. Well, you know what? A lot of those families love to play Mortal Kombat. But yeah, the Mortal Kombat OG origins, and we're getting to that right now. So we know Johnny Cage was a movie star. According to his bio in the original booklets for the home system versions of Mortal Kombat, I think his real name was John Carlton. And I'm not sure if Cage was a part of the last name or if that was just a stage name he gave himself. But he had an ex-wife, so he's a divorcee at that point. And I think he even has a daughter with the ex-wife. And this was before he even went to the first Mortal Kombat tournament. And he got this invite, and his agent said it'd be good for his career. And so he's out the door, to go get on this clunky ship to go compete at this tournament. And then you got Liu Kang. Liu Kang is the token chosen one, And Liu Kang has been chosen by the Shaolin Temple and the White Lotus Society to represent the White Lotus in the tournament. And he has a savage hatred for Shang Tsung, who is a vile enemy of the White Lotus. And so he's off. And then we have Kano. And this is another thing too, and it's an important thing for many universes of Mortal Kombat. In the instruction booklets, Kano was described as an American child that was brought by an American woman to Tokyo and abandoned in Tokyo as a small child. So he was an American who grew up in Tokyo. So his English and probably very good Tokyo, very good Japanese probably, should sound American. There was no mention of Australia in the entire OG origin story of Kano. All we know is that he got into trouble after he grew up and became a cutthroat member of the international gang called the Black Dragon. A bunch of cutthroat madmen. They're feared in all of crime's inner circles. And then you go down the line, and the nemesis of Kano, or at least one of the lead people going after him, was Sonya Blade. And she had a whole squadron of people that were dedicated to stop the Black Dragon, and specifically to try to capture Kano. And her entire thing was she was following Kano, and she followed him to that boat. And there's a lot of gunfire and explosions. And you have to understand, too, the story for the characters' origins in the home versions booklets are directly from the Midway approved comic book from Malibu Comics called Mortal Kombat Blood and Thunder. There's even an advertisement for the comic book in the Mortal Kombat 2 video game, as well as the music CD. But the home versions, these patches of story and artwork are taken directly from that comic book, which had a major deal of input from John Tobias himself, as well as the art style they went with. So basically, that's the true origin stories, is Malibu Comics, Mortal Kombat, Blood and Thunder. And later there's a MK2 comic book, and it's kind of following in that same formula. But so Sonya, her story, she's chasing Kano. She's on that boat. Her team is kind of following her a little bit. But once they get to the island, her team gets captured by Shang Tsung's private army. And she's forced to compete in the tournament, not only to save herself, but to save the members of her team that are now being held hostages. And at the same time, she's trying to go after Kano. Well, he has to compete in the tournament too, because he got on that boat. He got on the boat without an invitation, just like she did. The invited ones were Johnny Cage and Kano. And apparently there was an invite to the Lin Kuei, which is a group of Chinese ninja that Sub-Zero is a member of. He's on that boat. And I I believe there was another Lin Kuei member with him. I guess they work in groups of 2. But he encounters Scorpion. Sub-Zero encounters Scorpion on the boat. And here's the thing, folks. We're told so much BS in the later Mortal Kombat titles. In the OG Mortal Kombat, according to those booklets, Scorpion grabs Sub-Zero by the uniform thing right under his ninja hood neck collar, and he pulls him close. He says, "Look into my eyes. Yes, Lin Kuei, you murdered me years ago to this day." He's going, "No, it can't be. It can't be." He says, "Yes, my demons have allowed me to return to avenge my death. I could kill you here at this moment, but instead I will face you at the tournament. Then you will pay for your crimes, Lin Kuei." The thing is, according to the booklet, Scorpion's body is an exact duplicate. It's a duplicate of Sub-Zero's body. It's the body he was given by his demons that allowed him to come back to life. And he has these eyes that kind of fluctuate from normal to being white, to almost glowing at times. But with the ability within them, Sub-Zero was allowed to see through the eyes who the person was. And Scorpion was originally a rival assassin from a Japanese group of ninjas. They met in the battlefield, and Sub-Zero did what his assassin groups do. They fought the enemy, and he killed Scorpion. But when Scorpion went to the afterlife, he decided he didn't want to stay, and he made a deal. There was no mention of any of Scorpion's family being dead or any of that. That was stuff that was dreamed up later, and therefore cannot be considered canon. It was dreamed up later, and it wasn't dreamed up by John Tobias, because the stuff written in the OG arcade machine and home versions of those arcade machines, that's true John Tobias story, and therefore the true Mortal Kombat origins. And the uniform, here's the big thing, the big shock, the big powwow, right? Scorpion's uniform is identical to Sub-Zero's uniform, except for one aspect. Instead of blue, it is in deliberate, cowardly yellow. And that was the emphasis, cowardly yellow. His clothing is to mock the Lin Kuei. It's to call them cowards. It has nothing to do with his ninja assassin clan from Japan. It has nothing to do with that. It doesn't look like any of that. The body he's in doesn't even look like his body. Whatever the physical formation of his body was, he's not using that. In the first Mortal Kombat and the second Mortal Kombat, it's still a copy of Sub-Zero's body. The height, the weight, everything. The faces underneath the mask, identical. And that is the true canon origin of these Mortal Kombat characters. And, see, did I get everybody? Oh, yeah, Raiden, yeah. Well, we all pretty much know Raiden is the god of thunder. In the original Mortal Kombat, according to the booklet, he was invited by Shang Tsung himself. For whatever reason, Shang Tsung wanted one of the Earth gods to compete in Mortal Kombat. He knew there would be limitations. He knew that the Earth God would not be able to keep his full godliness while competing in the tournament. but he knew there would be some powers he'd have to look out for. But the strange thing about the booklet regarding Raiden, they describe their statistics, their heights, their weights, all that. But in Raiden's case, where everybody else is like 5 foot this or 6 foot that, Raiden is described as being 7 feet tall. He's over 7 feet tall, folks. But in the game, of course, it doesn't look that way. He looks like he's about the same height as Scorpion, the actor that plays Raiden in the 3 Mortal Kombat arcade machines. And he does appear in the third one, but only as a friendship from Nightwolf. Raiden is played by Carlos Pesina, the brother of Daniel Pesina. So there you go, folks. But yeah, so let's see, on the bingo list, who we got here? We got Raiden, we got Johnny Cage, we got the 2 ninjas, and we got Sonya, and we got Liu Kang. And Liu Kang, is inspired by a lot of martial art movies. A bit of Bruce Lee is thrown in there. A little bit of Jackie Chan as well. And the overall backgrounds give you a very a cross between Enter the Dragon and Little China kind of thing. The Raiden character itself was inspired by the Elemental Warriors from the Kurt Russell movie Big Trouble in Little China. Ed Boon has verified this before, and there were a few different aspects kind of thrown together. But these are the origins. These are where the characters come from. There's no mention of a Bi-Han or anybody else, and there's definitely no Frost, I could go into it some more on MK2. MK2 was the ultimate upgrade. There were more fighters, more fatalities. Everything has a ancient Asia look. There could be an argument that the portals between Outworld and Earth, that cultural clothing from people like Kitana and her mother Sindel and things like that might have influenced Earthlings a few thousand years ago or whatever, and it might have influenced Japan and China. And so the games, they should look very Chinese and Japanese and in clothing and whatnot for the non-English speaking fighters, or the ones that come from a land that typically doesn't speak English. And that's kind of the hang-ups I have on some of the games later that came out. I don't take MK4 seriously at all, or MK Gold. I mean, yeah, we know that Mortal Kombat was destined to become a 3D fighter at some point, but they decided to go in a very cartoonish direction with MK4, and the cheeseball humor was cranked up to the max in that game. And as an MK fan, I'm sad to say what are the ultra young folks saying today now? With the whole cringe, they use cringe all the time. It's really cringe. Yeah, it's so shay, cringe. Yeah. So yeah, MK4, MK Gold is cringe. And it's just basically embarrassing to watch that, I'm apologizing to the folks that worked at Midway that made MK4. I'm sure they put a lot of work into it, and I know that Rich DeVizio did some motion capture. This is different. Now it's not a person in blue screen. Motion capture versus digitizing. Motion capture, a person wears basically a wetsuit or a wetsuit skin with little reflective ping pong balls glued or taped at very specific points on the suit, so they can be tracked when they do punches and roundhouses and all that. So it'll be a 3D skeleton of the fighter doing those moves and being able to be shown and recorded from all directions. And then later they can construct texture and other things upon the 3D skeleton. It's very complex. It's time consuming as all hell. And the more updated the 3D technology, the more detail work they have to do to make it look nice. But Midway had experimented with another arcade machine, and they had even used some Mortal Kombat actors in it. And they combined both processes. They made 3D character skeletons, but they took entire strips of the character and they took an actor without ping pong balls, just in costume, and they shot them from like 360 degrees. And they had Carrie Hoskins that played Sonya in MK3. She played Vala in War Gods. And who is that guy? Brian Glenn that played Shao Kahn. I believe he played the character called Warhead in War Gods. I'm not sure who played Maximus. I would have thought that would have been Brian Glenn, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with the actor that played Kabuki Joe. And the voodoo character was a very extreme, a little bit of CGI, a little bit of just creating a fighter, because it's supposed to be a witch doctor that's been mostly burned to death, and his corpse has come back to life through the power of the ore as well as voodoo. Hence his name, Voodoo. But even he looks very detailed and whatnot. There's a fighter that's also created that way called Sci-Fi, Sci-Fi, and he's kind of a Terminator endoskeleton wannabe. And I don't like him. I don't like Sci-Fi. I felt that they did it well with voodoo, with the witch doctor corpse, but with Sci-Fi, it just doesn't look good at all. It looks downright crappy. And as I go along there, and I'm sorry if this is droning on, folks, I wanted to keep this not too long, you know. But, oh, that's interesting. I'm witnessing some deer running down the sidewalk out there. Yeah, like I said, it's a bit of a rural community. We do have deer in the area, and they come out at night, I guess, to copulate and eat some food, you know. It's not a big deal. You see them from time to time. But, where was I? Oh yeah, I was talking about Sci-Fi. So they did this experimental game, and it would have been what a Mortal Kombat 4 could have possibly looked like if they wanted to go with realistic look to emulate the realistic Mortal Kombats they had previously made, only now in a 3D realm. But Midway got a big yellow streak down their back, and they chickened out, and they decided to go cartoony. They decided to go the Virtua Fighter route. You know, a little better looking than Virtua Fighter 2, but MK4, it was not a successful transition. And the cornball humor they decided to give to it did not help it, not in the least. And I just have to say, you know, it burns me up that here they had succeeded in making War Gods and even using Mortal Kombat actors. And if you look at the layout of a War Gods arcade machine as well as the home versions, by the way, hint, hint, The N64 War Gods is probably the best one to get. Second on the list is the PC version. The PlayStation version is not worth getting at all, because I found this out the hard way. A lot of unusual security programming in the PlayStation War Gods, because of the way they did this, it will only load on the very first model PlayStation, the one that has RCA jacks on the back of the console. And that's not a joke. That's just a heads up, word to the wise. Because if you put it in any PS machine, generally speaking, that's not the first model, it gets to the Eurocom screen, and that's all it does. You're stuck at Eurocom, and you have to remove the game or reset it, and it'll just get you stuck again at the Eurocom screen. So, software fun for everyone. Anyway, the irony that it gets stuck there, and no software fun for anyone. But yeah, you can check that now. If you know a game reseller in your area, go get that PlayStation War Gods. Yeah. Just remember, you're only getting it so it'll just get stuck. But if you're lucky enough to have a functioning original model PS1 with the RCA, that's the yellow, white, and red plugs on the very back of the console. And that's the one the security code allows it to play on. But even then, if you can play it on one of those, and I did play mine on one of my friends who had the original model, it plays slower, much noticeably slower than the N64 version. But the PC model has a lot better functionality as far as its PlayStation counterpart. And it has all the stuff you would find on the PlayStation version, more or less. The sound quality, the video quality, all that, you know. And you can custom button map it to whatever control pads or Gravis controllers or some sort of Logitech controller. But yeah, just a little word of caution to you folks there. But my gripes before I conclude this video is that the Mortal Kombat's number 5 through 9, majority of them, because John Tobias is not part of the company from those periods, the story has been heavily reimagined. Heavily reimagined. A lot of artwork has been drastically redone on some characters. I noticed after MK5, and maybe during part of MK5, they started to take their design inspiration not from China, not from Japan. No, it's like this I Dream of Jeannie, Arabic, Thief of Baghdad thing, and the timing of it was real suspect. A lot of our young folks, you know, big props to anybody that's been in the military, but a lot of our young folks were sent off to the Gulf War, and a lot of the ones coming back from the Gulf War, you know, a good chunk of them were gamers. And here they come back from Iraq, and they find out, you know, this American fighting game that's styled to look like Asian and Japanese influences, but this American fighting game made right there, up there in Chicago, you know. Then they see all this Arabic stuff on all their characters that they love playing with and stuff. And I'm sure it didn't sit well with a lot of the veterans that came back. I'm sure they were like, you know, what's with all this Arabic stuff, you know? That must have not felt right at all, you know. Here you go, serve your country, and you're fighting against some Arabic folks, and you see nothing but Arabic for months and years or whatever of your service, you come back and your favorite fighting franchise has jumped ship to Arabic land, and I'm just saying, that these were our men and women, a lot of them in their teens, and they came back and their home franchise fighting game was suddenly Arabic inspired, and that must have been, well, one, it must have been a big disappointment to a lot of them. Two, it might have ticked off a few of them. There might have been a few that thought it was kind of ironic and maybe just kind of went with it, but it does seem kind of weird, the timing of that. If you think that was kind of unusual too, then please mention it in the comments. And I have Arabic friends. If you work in most places, you probably have a couple workers that are Arabic. I don't have anything against them personally or anything. I'm just saying that, some of the veterans that came back, it was probably something they weren't expecting and probably were not looking forward to based on what they had just come back from. So if you agree with me on that, please let me know in the comments. There's a lot of good shopping on AliExpress, and I tend to check their stuff frequently. So yeah, I'm fine with it, folks. But I just thought it was out of place on Mortal Kombat. But then the story rigging, the story tampering, after John Tobias was out the door. See, he did the failed MK Mythologies game. It was mostly his production. And basically, Ed Boon kind of threw him under the bus for that. Midway lost a good chunk of money, a lot of bad reviews on that game. And then the Special Forces game that came after it was way worse. Those were the stinky turds of the MK line at that time. John Tobias, pardon my butchering of a name, sorry about that, John. John Tobias later went on to make Tao Feng Enter the Fist for the Xbox. He made his own game studio, Studio Gigante. And the only game that I remember from that studio was his fighting game called Tao Feng Enter the Fist. I was not an Xbox owner, and that was an Xbox exclusive, which was another thing going against it. In hindsight, in retrospective, I believe John would have had a slight bit more success had that been through a different company and not Xbox exclusive. Seeing how Mortal Kombat and its sequels are not Xbox exclusives, I think he should have rethought Tao Feng being an Xbox exclusive. But that's just little old me, little old retro gaming wild elf here in Florida. And if you guys have an opinion on that, well, here's this wonderful comment box here under the video. Please let us know. But a shout out to Captain Frugal and Bunch, the Frugal family. A shout out to my good friend Slipstream GT, aka Mr. Mods. He's a customizer of consoles and making fine portables out of them and laptops. But yeah, so MK5 all the way through, and the only MK game that I've seen that looks like an MK game, to me at least, is MKX. MKX looks like a true MK game in 3D. And you'd go, oh, well, you don't consider MK11 a good MK 3D game? You don't consider the rebirth of MK1 a good MK game? No, I don't. I consider it just rehashed. Ed does not like John Tobias, even all these years later. He tried to get rid of Noob Saibot when they made the Noob Smoke character. Just the fact it was Noob Smoke pushed together. It was to throw away the Tobias, and instead you had the Boone and Smoke, you know? Then later he wanted to respell Tobias differently for Saibot. He wanted to spell Saibot differently so it didn't make mention of Tobias. But that's ridiculous because he is the second half of that great team. The co-creator of Mortal Kombat. Also known in its earlier prototype stage, Dragon Attack. So I hope this was slightly entertaining. It's droned on a little longer than I wanted it to. I hope I touched base and covered the major points. But I only consider the arcade machines of Mortal Kombat canon, and the home versions based off of those arcade machines. I am impressed somewhat with MKX, but not the story writing at all. Just the look and the gameplay. It has a feel of Mortal Kombat. It has a look of true Mortal Kombat, even though it's 3D. It is a pain that they did not release MKX as a PS3 title. No, they waited till the PS4, but I think they could have made a good MKX on the PS3 and its equivalent, the Xbox 360. But, you know, what could have been, oh my. All right, guys, this has been Wild Elf 26. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any more MK questions, or when OG MK fan like myself, who was actually a teenager when the first MK hit arcades. So have a great one, folks. Be good to each other. Help folks if they're hurting or something, if you can. And just may the Triforce protect and bless you all. All right. This is Wild Elf 26, y'all. Extreme close-up.